In 1953, when Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay became the first people to summit Mount Everest, climbing the mountain was an expedition, a multi-year project involving the world's best mountaineers, extensive planning, and extraordinary risk. Between 1953 and 1989, a span of 36 years, only about 300 people summited Everest, and fewer than 100 died. The death rate was high, but the numbers were low, because only elite climbers attempted it. In a single year, to 876 people summited Everest, and 17 died. In 2019, 876 people summited, and 11 died waiting in a traffic jam. In 2015, 19 died, mostly from an earthquake-triggered avalanche. In 2014, 16 Sherpas died in a single avalanche. The numbers are exploding. More people are summiting than ever before, and more people are dying than ever before. In the 1990s, the average death toll on Everest was 4 to 6 people per year. It climbed to 6 to 8 per year. In the 2010s, it jumped to 8 to 12 per year. And in the 2020s, it's averaging 12 to 17 deaths per year. Everest is getting deadlier, not just in absolute numbers, but in death rate, in danger, in preventable tragedy. And it's not because the mountain is harder, the routes are the same. The altitude hasn't changed. The weather patterns are similar. Everest is getting deadlier because of us, because of commercialization. Overcrowding, climate change, inexperienced climbers, weak regulations, and an industry that prioritizes profit over safety. This is the story of why Everest is killing more people every year. The trends, the data, the disasters, and the uncomfortable truth that no one in the climbing industry wants to admit: it's going to get worse. This is that story. Mount Everest has always been deadly, but the data shows a clear, undeniable trend. It's getting worse. Let's look at the numbers by decade. In the 1950s and 1960s, during the early expeditions, there were about 100 total summits. About 20 people died. That's a death rate of roughly 20%. 1 in 5 climbers who attempted died. The climbers back then were elite mountaineers, national expeditions, extensive preparation. In the 1970s and 1980s, Everest opened to more climbers. There were about 400 total summits, about 60 deaths. The death rate was around 15%. 1 in 6 or 7 climbers died. The profile changed. Experienced climbers, yes, but some guided expeditions were beginning. In the 1990s, commercialization began. About 200 people summited. About 70 died. The death rate dropped to around 6%. 1 in 16 or 17 climbers died. The average deaths per year was 7. The climbers were now a mix of elite and guided clients. Commercialization was accelerating. In the 2000s, there was a commercial explosion. About 3,000 summits. About 80 deaths. Death rate around 3%. 1 in 37 climbers died. Average deaths per year, 8. The profile was predominantly guided clients, some very inexperienced. In the 2010s, the overcrowding era began. About 6,000 summits, about 120 deaths. Death rate, around 2%. 1 in 50 climbers died. Average deaths per year, 12. Mass commercialization. In the 2020s, the current era began. There have been about 4,000 summits through 2024. About 70 deaths. Death rate, around 1.75%. 1 in 57 climbers died. Average deaths per year, 14 to 17. Maximum commercialization, 478 permits were issued in 2023 alone. At first glance, the death rate appears to be improving, from 20% in the 1950s to under 2% in the 2020s. This is because of better equipment, oxygen systems, clothing, gear, fixed ropes on most routes, improved weather forecasting, helicopter rescue capabilities, medical knowledge of altitude sickness, but absolute deaths are increasing because the number of climbers has exploded, and more climbers equals more deaths. Even if the percentage is lower, the most deadly years by total deaths tell the story. 2015 had 19 deaths. An earthquake-triggered avalanche killed 19 at base camp. 2023 had 17 deaths. Overcrowding, exhaustion, traffic jams. The Khumbu icefall avalanche killed 16 Sherpas. 1996 had 15 deaths. The Into-Thin Air disaster plus other deaths. 2019 had 11 deaths. The traffic jam, overcrowding, excluding natural disasters like earthquakes. The trend is clear. 2023 had 17 deaths, the highest non-disaster total in Everest history. 2019 had 11 deaths directly linked to overcrowding. 2018 had 5 deaths, relatively low. Good weather. Many 2017 had 6 deaths. 2016 had 4 Everest deaths. Is experiencing boom and bust cycles. Good weather year equals more permits issued, more climbers, overcrowding, more deaths. Bad weather year equals fewer summits, fewer deaths. Disaster year, like earthquakes or avalanches, equals massive spike in deaths. But the baseline is rising. In the 1990s, a bad year meant 8 to 10 deaths. In the 2020s, a good year means 10 to 12 deaths. The death rate is misleading. Point to the decreasing death rate and claim Everest is safer than ever. But this is misleading for several reasons. First, survivor bias. The climbers who die are disproportionately inexperienced clients. The death rate among experienced mountaineers has remained low, but the death rate among first-time high-altitude climbers is much higher. Second, Sherpa deaths are undercounted. Official statistics often underreport Sherpa deaths or categorize them separately. Between 2004 and 2023, over 100 Sherpas died on Everest. That's roughly 1/3 of all deaths, but they're often excluded from climber death statistics. Third, rescue improvements mask risk. Modern helicopter rescues save people who would have died in earlier decades. The mountain is just as dangerous. We're just better at extracting people before they die. The uncomfortable truth is this: Everest is not getting safer, it's getting more crowded, and more crowded means more deaths. Even if the percentage decreases, the absolute number of people dying is increasing. 2023 was the deadliest non-disaster year in Everest history. 17 people died, and the causes weren't avalanches or earthquakes. They were preventable. Exhaustion, overcrowding, poor judgment, inadequate experience. And 2024, the trend continued. More permits, more data climbers, doesn't lie. More deaths. Everest is getting deadlier, and unless something changes, 2025 will be worse. The single biggest reason Everest is getting deadlier is overcrowding. Too many people, on routes designed for far fewer climbers, creating bottlenecks, delays, and deadly traffic jams. Nepal's government issues climbing permits for Everest, and the numbers have skyrocketed. In 2000, Nepal issued 85 permits. In 2010, 201 a record permits. At the time. In 2023, 378 permits. A new record. Each permit represents one climber. But when you add guides and Sherpas, the total number of people on the mountain is 2 to 3 times the permit count. So 478 permits equals 800 to 1,000 people attempting to summit. And they're all trying during a narrow 10 to 14-day weather window in May. The Southeast Ridge route, the most popular, has several natural places where only one person can climb at a time. The Hillary Step, a 40-foot near-vertical rock face just below the summit, fixed rope sections, single rope, single file climbing. The Summit Pyramid, a narrow ridge with sheer drops on both sides. In a normal season, with 100 to 150 climbers, these bottlenecks cause 10 to 15-minute delays, annoying but manageable. But with 800-plus climbers trying to summit on the same 3 to 4 days, the delays stretch to 2 to 4 hours, and waiting 2 to 4 hours at 28,000 feet in the death zone kills people. Let's revisit the 2019 traffic jam. On May 27, 2019, over 200 climbers queued on the Southeast Ridge. The photo went viral, A line of climbers in brightly colored suits waiting their turn to climb a single rope. 4 people died that day, 11 died that week. The causes were clear. Climbers burned through their oxygen supplies while waiting. Exhaustion. Standing for hours in the death zone is physically devastating. Hypothermia. Temperatures dropped. Wind picked up. Climbers froze. Poor judgment. Hypoxia. Impaired decision-making. People continued when they should have turned back. The 2023 season saw similar conditions. Nepal issued 478 permits, 97 more than the deadly 2019 season, and the results were predictable. Traffic jams, delays, exhaustion, deaths. 17 people died in 2023, most from causes directly linked to overcrowding, exhaustion from waiting in queues, running out of oxygen during delays, hypothermia from prolonged exposure, poor decision-making caused by summit fever and hypoxia. Why is overcrowding getting worse? First, Nepal depends on permit revenue. Each permit costs $11,000. In 2023, Nepal earned over $5 million from Everest permits alone. For a small, impoverished nation, this revenue is critical, so Nepal has a financial incentive to issue as many permits as possible, even when it's dangerous. Second, weather windows are narrow. There are only 4 to 7 days per year when conditions are safe enough to summit Everest. These days occur in mid-May. After the spring monsoon ends, but before summer storms begin, every expedition tries to summit during this window, so everyone climbs on the same days. Third, climbing companies coordinate summit attempts. Companies share weather forecasts and coordinate logistics. This means that when one company decides May 22 is summit day, other companies often make the same decision. The result? Everyone summits on the same day. Fourth, clients refuse to turn back. When clients see a traffic jam, they should turn back. But they've paid $50,000 to $100,000. They've trained for years, and the summit is right there. So they wait, and waiting kills. Here are real testimonies from 2023. One climber said this: "I waited 3 hours at the Hillary step. My oxygen was running low. My guide told me to descend, but I could see the summit. It was right there. So I waited, and I made it. But 2 people in my group didn't. They collapsed on the descent, and I stepped over them on my way down." Another climber said this: "The line wasn't moving. People were sitting in the snow. Some were lying down. I couldn't tell who was resting and who was dying. And I realized, this is insane. I'm waiting in a line to die. So I turned back, and I'm alive. But I didn't summit. And everyone asked me why I failed. And I have to explain, I didn't fail. I survived." A Sherpa gave this perspective. Every year it gets worse. More people, longer waits, more deaths. And we're the ones who have to move the bodies, who have to tell families their loved ones died waiting in line. It's not mountaineering anymore. It's a queue, a deadly queue. Here's the math of death. 478 permits in 2023. About 800 people on the mountain, including guides and Sherpas. 4 to 5 days of good weather, about 160 people summiting per day on average. The Hillary step can handle about 20 people per hour. 160 people divided by 20 per hour. No one can survive an 8-hour queue in the death zone. So people die every year in increasing numbers. The solution is obvious. Cap permits at 200 per season. This would reduce overcrowding, eliminate traffic jams, allow proper spacing between climbers, reduce deaths significantly. But Nepal won't do it because it would cost $3 million plus in annual revenue. Climbing companies won't support it because it would reduce their client base by 60%. And climbers won't demand it because they want access. They want their chance to summit. So the overcrowding continues, the traffic jams continue, and the deaths continue. In 2023, 17 people died on Everest. Many waited in line, burned through oxygen, froze, collapsed, and died, doing something they loved but shouldn't have been doing in a crowd. And in 2024, The trend continued. More permits, more crowds, more deaths, because overcrowding is profitable. And Everest is a business, and businesses don't voluntarily reduce revenue. Even when people die, climate change is making Mount Everest more dangerous, not in abstract, long-term ways, but in immediate, measurable, deadly ways. The mountain is changing, and it's killing people. The ice is melting. The Khumbu icefall is a massive, constantly shifting glacier between base camp and Camp 1. It's one of the most dangerous sections of the Everest climb. It's a chaotic maze of towering ice seracs, deep crevasses, and ladders lashed together over gaping voids. The icefall is in constant motion. It shifts, cracks, and collapses, and climbers have to traverse it multiple times during an expedition, carrying loads up, acclimatizing, descending, and finally making the summit push. But climate change is accelerating the icefall's movement. Rising temperatures cause the ice to melt faster, making the icefall more unstable. Seracs collapse more frequently. Crevasses open without warning, and the route through the icefall has to be re-established every year, sometimes multiple times per season. Here's the data. In the 1990s, the Khumbu icefall moved approximately 1 meter per day. In the 2010s, it moved approximately 1.2 meters per day. In the 2020s, it's moving approximately 1.5 meters per day. That increase may seem small, but faster movement means more frequent collapses. And more collapses mean more deaths. April 18, 2014 was the deadliest day in Everest history, excluding earthquakes. An avalanche swept through the Khumbu icefall, killing 16 Sherpas in a single event. It remains the deadliest climbing disaster in Everest history, excluding the 2015 earthquake. The avalanche was triggered by an unstable ice serac that collapsed without warning. The collapse was likely linked to warmer than usual temperatures that weakened the ice. After the disaster, Sherpas went on strike. They demanded better pay, better insurance, and recognition that their lives were being sacrificed. For an industry that didn't value them, the Nepali government made minor concessions. But the fundamental problem remains. The icefall is getting more dangerous, and Sherpas bear the brunt of the risk. The South Col is changing too. The South Col, the area at 26,000 feet where Camp 4 is located, used to be relatively stable. But climate change is causing the snow and ice to melt, exposing bare rock, making the terrain more unstable. Climbers report more rockfall, stones dislodged by melting ice, fewer stable tent platforms, bare rock instead of flat snow, increased wind exposure, less snow to block wind. The Hillary Step collapsed. The 2015 Nepal earthquake, magnitude 7.8, partially destroyed the Hillary Step, the iconic rock face just below the summit. The earthquake caused rockfalls and shifted the terrain, creating a new, slightly less vertical but more unstable route. But the earthquake wasn't the only factor. Decades of melting ice had already weakened the step. The earthquake just finished the job. The new Hillary Step is considered by many climbers to be more dangerous than the original, because the rock is loose and crumbling. The route is less defined. There's no clear best way to climb it. Avalanche risk is increasing. Warmer temperatures destabilize snow, increasing avalanche risk. Data from the Himalayan database shows this clearly. Avalanche-related deaths on Everest have increased by 30% in the 2010s and 2020s. Compared to the 1990s and 2000s, avalanches are occurring at higher altitudes, areas that were previously stable. Avalanches are occurring later in the season. May instead of April. The death zone refers to altitudes above 26,000 feet, where the human body cannot acclimatize and begins to die. But climate change is effectively expanding the death zone by making lower altitudes more dangerous. How? By reducing snow cover. Less snow means more exposed rock, harder to climb, more rockfall, less water from melting snow. Climbers rely on melting snow for drinking water, increased UV radiation exposure. Snow bodies are emerging. As glaciers melt, bodies that were buried decades ago are reappearing. In 2017, a body emerged from a glacier near Everest Base Camp. The clothing suggested the person died in the 1970s or 1980s. In 2019, more remains were discovered, and in 2023, several bodies that had been buried under snow for years became visible again. This isn't just macabre, it's evidence that the mountain is fundamentally changing. Ice that has been stable for decades is melting, and that instability is making Everest more dangerous. The jet stream is shifting. The jet stream, a high-altitude wind current, normally sits at 30,000 feet plus, above Everest's summit at 29,032 feet. But climate change is causing the jet stream to dip lower, and when it dips below 29,000 feet, it brings hurricane-force winds directly to the summit, winds of 150 miles per hour or more. This makes summit attempts impossible, and it reduces the number of safe climbing days per season. In the 1990s, there were typically 7 to 10 good summit days per season. In the 2020s, there are 4 to 6 days. Fewer days means more crowding, and more crowding means more deaths. In 2023, several climbers reported real impacts, more rockfall than in previous years, attributed to melting ice, unstable ice bridges in the Khumbu icefall, several collapsed mid-season. Warmer temperatures at high altitude. Sleeping at Camp 4 felt less cold than expected. Visible ice melt even above 26,000 feet. One Sherpa guide said this: "The mountain is changing. Every year it's different. Routes we used last year don't exist this year. Ice that was solid last year is melting this year, and it's getting more dangerous. I've been climbing Everest for 20 years, and I've never seen it like this." The uncomfortable truth is this: climate change is not a future threat to Everest. It's a present threat. The mountain is melting, becoming unstable, more dangerous, and there's no solution. Because we can't stop climate change fast enough to save Everest. The ice will keep melting. The icefall will keep collapsing. The avalanches will keep coming. And the deaths will keep increasing because Everest is a glacier, and glaciers are dying. And when the mountain dies, it takes climbers with it. Mount Everest used to be reserved for the world's best mountaineers. Today, anyone with $50,000 to $100,000 can attempt it, and that's killing people. Here's the commercialization timeline. Before the 1990s, Everest was climbed almost exclusively by national expeditions and elite mountaineers. Summiting required years of high-altitude experience, technical climbing skills, and extensive preparation. In the 1990s, adventure tourism companies began offering guided Everest expeditions. For $65,000, clients could be guided to the summit by professional mountaineers. The pitch was simple. You don't need elite skills, just fitness and determination. In the 2000s, the market exploded. Dozens of companies competed for clients. Prices dropped. Some companies offered $35,000 expeditions. Standards dropped, and inexperienced climbers flooded the mountain. In the 2010s and 2020s, mass commercialization took over. Over 50 companies operating on Everest, clients with zero high-altitude experience attempting the summit, and deaths increasing year over year. The problem is this: commercial clients often lack the skills, experience and judgment needed to survive Everest. They rely entirely on guides and Sherpas. And when something goes wrong, when weather turns bad, when they run out of oxygen, when they get separated from their group, they panic, and panic kills. Here are real examples. In 2019, Anjali Kulkarni, a 55-year-old Indian climber, attempted Everest with minimal high-altitude experience. She ran out of oxygen waiting in the traffic jam. She tried to continue without oxygen, a catastrophic decision. She collapsed and died 300 meters from the summit. In 2023, there were multiple cases of climbers unable to use crampons properly, slipping on ice, panicking when encountering other climbers, bodies, refusing to turn back despite guides' orders, collapsing from exhaustion after summiting because they hadn't trained adequately. There's what I call the Disneyland effect. Climbers increasingly treat Everest like a theme park ride. They pay money, expect to be guided to the top, and assume the guides will keep them safe. But Everest isn't Disneyland. It's the death zone, and guides can't save you from your own poor decisions. Here are some testimonies. One guide said this: "I've had clients who couldn't tie their own climbing knots, who'd never used an ice axe before Everest, who thought acclimatization was optional, and these people are paying $100,000 to climb the highest mountain on Earth. It's insane." Another guide said this: "Clients demand summits. They've paid money. They expect results. And if I tell them to turn back, they threaten to leave bad reviews, to sue, to ruin my reputation. So there's enormous pressure to push clients forward, even when it's unsafe." A Sherpa guide said this: "Western clients often don't listen. They think they know better, they ignore warnings, and then they die, and we're the ones who have to carry their bodies down." The experience gap is staggering. In the 1990s, the average Everest climber had summited multiple peaks above 7,000 meters before attempting Everest. They had years of high-altitude experience. In the 2020s, many climbers have summited 1 or 0 peaks above 6,500 meters before Everest. Some have never climbed above 5,000 meters. Nepal technically requires proof of experience: 1 peak above 6,500 meters. But the requirement is poorly defined. Which certificates are easily faked, weakly enforced, and insufficient. One 6,500-meter peak does not equal Everest readiness. There's also the fitness delusion. Many clients believe physical fitness is enough. "I run marathons. I'm strong. I can do this." But Everest requires more than fitness. It requires technical skills: ice climbing, rope work, crampon use, altitude adaptation. Some people genetically don't adapt well. Mental toughness, the ability to make rational decisions while hypoxic, judgment, knowing when to turn back. Running marathons doesn't teach you how to traverse a crevasse field, or how to recognize cerebral edema, or how to make life or death decisions at 28,000 feet with 40% of normal oxygen. There's also the guided climbing illusion. Guided implies safety. But on Everest, guides can't guarantee your survival, because guides manage multiple clients. 1 guide for every 2 to 4 clients. If everyone's in trouble simultaneously, the guide can't save everyone. Guides are also oxygen deprived and exhausted. They're operating with impaired judgment too, and guides can't carry you. If you collapse at 28,000 feet, you're too heavy to move. You'll die where you fall. The commercial race to the bottom is real. Climbing companies compete for clients, and in a competitive market, companies that are too strict lose business. Companies that turn away unqualified clients, that enforce rigorous training requirements, that prioritize safety over summits, they lose business to companies that are more lenient. This creates a race to the bottom. Companies lower prices to attract clients. Quality of support decreases. Companies accept less qualified clients. Risk increases. Companies push clients to summit. High success rates equal good marketing. And deaths increase. Here's the 2023 data. Of the 17 deaths in 2023, 11 were commercial clients, not professional mountaineers. 8 had summited fewer than 2 peaks above 7,000 meters before attempting Everest. 6 were over age 50. Age plus altitude equals increased risk. 4 died on the descent after summiting, exhaustion from lack of training. The uncomfortable truth is this: many people who die on Everest shouldn't have been there in the first place, not because they weren't brave or determined or fit, but because they lack the experience, skills, and judgment necessary to survive the death zone. And the climbing industry knows this, but they take the client's money anyway, because it's profitable, because clients demand access, and because legally, clients sign waivers acknowledging the risks. So inexperienced climbers keep attempting Everest, keep paying, keep dying, and the industry keeps profiting. In 2023, 17 people died. How many of them would be alive if Nepal had enforced strict experience requirements? If climbing companies had turned away unqualified clients? If the industry prioritized safety over profit? We'll never know. Because the industry won't change. Not voluntarily. Not while there's money to be made. Not while clients keep paying $100,000 to die on the world's highest mountain. Between 2004 and 2023, over 100 Sherpas died on Mount Everest. That's roughly 1 in 3 of all Everest deaths, and Sherpas represent only about 20% of climbers. This disparity reveals an uncomfortable truth. Sherpas bear disproportionate risk, and they're dying at rates far higher than Western clients. Who are Sherpas? Sherpa is both an ethnic group and a job title. The Sherpa people are indigenous to the Himalayan region of Nepal and Tibet. They're genetically adapted to high altitude. Their bodies produce more red blood cells and process oxygen more efficiently than lowland populations. But Sherpa has also become shorthand for high-altitude worker. And this conflation erases their humanity. They're not just workers. They're people, with families, lives, dreams. What do Sherpas do? Sherpas perform the most dangerous work on Everest, setting fixed ropes, climbing ahead of clients to install ropes on technical sections, carrying loads, hauling tents, food, oxygen, equipment up the mountain, often 50 to 80 pounds per load, breaking trail, being first through deep snow, increasing avalanche risk, rescuing clients. When clients collapse, Sherpas attempt rescues, recovering bodies. When people die, Sherpas move the bodies. All of this work occurs in the death zone, and Sherpas make multiple trips, ascending and descending repeatedly. While Western clients typically make one summit push, more exposure equals more risk equals more deaths. Let's talk about the 2014 Khumbu icefall disaster. On April 18, 2014, an avalanche in the Khumbu icefall killed 16 Sherpas. They were setting ropes and carrying loads for upcoming client expeditions. It was early season, weeks before summit attempts. The Sherpas were doing their jobs, preparing the route, and the mountain killed them. The disaster sparked outrage. Sherpas went on strike. They demanded better pay, $10,000 plus per season, instead of $3,000 to $5,000, better insurance, $15,000 life insurance instead of $4,000, government support for families of dead Sherpas, and safer working conditions. The Nepali government made minor concessions. Some improvements were made, but the fundamental problem remains. Sherpas are underpaid, underinsured, and overexposed to risk. The pay disparity is staggering. A Western guide earns $10,000 to $30,000 per expedition. A Sherpa guide earns $3,000 to $8,000 per expedition. A Western client pays $50,000 to $100,000 plus for an expedition. If a Sherpa dies, their family receives $15,000 in compensation. A Western client pays more for a single Everest expedition than a Sherpa earns in 10+ years of climbing. And when a Sherpa dies, their family receives compensation that wouldn't cover 1 year of living expenses. The insurance gap is just as bad. When a Western climber dies, their family typically receives life insurance payouts, $500,000 to $1 million or more, legal settlements if negligence is involved, crowdfunding support, online communities rally. When a Sherpa dies, their family receives $15,000 from Nepali government insurance. If the claim is approved, Minimal support from expedition companies, limited crowdfunding, Sherpa deaths receive less media coverage, there's cultural exploitation happening. Western climbers often romanticize Sherpas. They call them brave, strong, natural high-altitude athletes. They post photos with Sherpas on social media, praising their skill. But this romanticization obscures exploitation because Sherpas aren't climbing for glory. They're climbing because it's the only way to earn a living. In a region with limited economic opportunities, they're climbing because their families depend on the income, and they're dying because the industry demands it. Here are some testimonies. Dawa Sherpa, a guide with 10+ Everest summits, said this: Western clients think we're superheroes, that we don't feel cold, don't get tired, don't get scared, but we're human. We feel everything, and we're terrified, but we can't show it. Because if we show fear, clients lose confidence, and if clients lose confidence, we lose work. Yangchen Sherpa, widow of Gyaltsen Sherpa who died in 2019, said this: My husband died so a Western climber could reach the summit. And that climber posted photos on Instagram, called it the achievement of a lifetime, and my husband is dead, and I'm left with 2 children and no income. And the climber, he's back in his country, living his life. And my husband is still on the mountain. In the 2023 season, of the 17 deaths, 6 were Sherpas. That's 35% of deaths, despite representing only about 20% of climbers. Most died while working, setting ropes, carrying loads, rescuing clients. All were supporting Western expeditions. Why do Sherpas die more? First, more exposure. Sherpas make multiple trips through dangerous areas. Western clients make one summit push. Second, heavier loads. Sherpas carry 50 to 80 pounds of gear. Clients carry 10 to 20 pounds, or nothing. Third, riskier tasks. Sherpas set ropes on untested routes, break trail through avalanche zones, rescue clients who collapse. Fourth, less rest. Sherpas work while clients acclimatize. They're constantly moving, constantly exposed. Fifth, economic pressure. Sherpas can't afford to turn back. If they refuse a job, they don't get paid. Western clients uncomfortable question is anytime. Is it ethical to hire Sherpas to risk their lives so wealthy Westerners can summit Everest? Some argue this. Sherpas choose this work. It's voluntary. They're paid for the risk. Others argue this. Choice isn't real when the alternative is poverty. Sherpas are economically coerced into dangerous work. There's no consensus, but the deaths continue. The solution no one implements is clear. Pay Sherpas fairly. Match Western guide rates. $15,000 plus per expedition. Increase insurance. $100,000 plus life insurance. Matching Western standards, limit Sherpa exposure, rotate Sherpas to reduce individual risk, share profits. Expedition companies should contribute to Sherpa welfare funds, but these solutions cost money, and companies won't voluntarily increase costs, so Sherpas keep dying at disproportionate rates for disproportionately low pay, while Western clients pursue their dreams, and the industry calls this partnership. But it's exploitation, and it's killing people, one Sherpa at a time. Every season, every year, every problem making Everest Deadlier is accelerating, not slowing, not stabilizing, accelerating. And unless dramatic changes occur, changes that no one with power wants to make, Everest will continue getting deadlier every year. Trend number 1, permits will keep increasing. Nepal issued 478 permits, and there's no indication Nepal will reduce that record number, because Nepal's economy depends on permit revenue, $11 million plus annually. Demand is increasing. More people globally can afford Everest expeditions, and competing countries offer alternatives. If Nepal caps permits, climbers go to the Tibet, China side, Projections suggest Nepal could issue 500+ permits by 2025 to 2026. That means 1,000+ people on the mountain during peak season. And current infrastructure can't handle that. Here's the math. 500 permits equals about 1,000 people attempting the summit, 5 to 6 good weather days per season. About 180 people summiting per day. The Hillary step handles about 20 people per hour. 180 divided by 20 equals a 9-hour wait. No one survives a 9-hour wait in the death zone. Deaths will increase proportionally. Trend number 2. Climate change will accelerate. Global temperatures are rising, glaciers are melting, and Everest's ice is disappearing faster than projections predicted. Scientific projections show this. By 2030, the Khumbu icefall will be 30 to 40% less stable than it was in 2000. By 2040, sections of the Southeast Ridge route may become impassable due to ice loss. By 2050, Everest Base Camp may need to relocate. The current location is on a melting glacier. More instability equals more avalanches equals more deaths. Trend number 3. Inexperienced climbers will keep coming. Social media has made Everest aspirational. It's a bucket list item, a status symbol, a photo opportunity. And as long as people see summit photos on Instagram, they'll want to attempt it. Climbing companies won't turn away clients, because clients equal revenue. And in a competitive market, companies that accept anyone willing to pay will win business. So inexperienced climbers will keep attempting Everest. Keep making bad decisions. Keep dying. Trend number 4. Sherpas will keep dying unless pay increases, insurance improves, and working conditions change. Sherpas will continue bearing disproportionate risk, and they'll keep dying at rates higher than Western clients. Some Sherpas are refusing to work. Younger generations are pursuing education, leaving the region, finding other jobs. But many have no choice. Climbing is their family's livelihood, so they keep climbing and keep dying. Trend number 5. Rescue capabilities won't keep up. Helicopter rescues have improved, but they're reaching their limits. Helicopters can't fly above 26,000 feet reliably, and even at lower altitudes, rescues are weather-dependent, expensive, and dangerous. As more climbers collapse in the death zone, rescue demands will exceed capacity, and people will be left to die simply because there aren't enough resources to save everyone. Here's the worst-case scenario. If current trends continue, here's what we can expect. 500+ permits, 15 to 20 deaths, 550+ permits, 20 to 25 deaths, 600+ permits. A mass casualty event, 25+ deaths in a single season. A mass casualty event where 20+ people die in one season will eventually occur. It's statistically inevitable, and when it happens, there will be global outrage, calls for reform, promises of change, and then nothing will change. Just like after 2019, just like after 2023. Could anything stop this? Theoretically, yes. Here are actions that would reduce deaths. First, cap permits at 200 per season. This would eliminate overcrowding, reduce traffic jams, and save lives. But Nepal won't do it. Revenue loss. Second, enforce strict experience requirements. Require climbers to summit at least 3 peaks above 7,000 meters before attempting Everest. This would ensure climbers are prepared. But companies won't support it. Reduces client base. Third, implement mandatory turnaround times. Climbers who don't reach the summit by 1 p.m. must descend immediately. No exceptions. This would prevent late summits and exhaustion deaths. But enforcement is nearly impossible. Fourth, increase Sherpa pay and insurance. Match Western guide rates. Provide $100,000 plus life insurance. This would reduce exploitation and improve conditions. But companies won't voluntarily increase costs. Fifth, close Everest for 1 season. Allow the mountain to reset. Repair infrastructure. Reassess safety protocols. But this would cost Nepal $11 million plus in lost revenue. It won't happen. The uncomfortable truth is this: none of these solutions will be implemented because they all cost money. And the people who would need to pay, Nepal's government, climbing companies, clients, won't voluntarily accept those costs. So Everest will continue as is. More permits, more climbers, more deaths. The ethical question remains: should Everest be closed to commercial climbing entirely? Arguments for closing. Everest has become a tourist trap where people die for Instagram photos. The mountain is being destroyed by overcrowding and climate change. Sherpas are being exploited and killed. Commercialization has removed all dignity from mountaineering. Arguments against closing, climbing Everest is a human right. Anyone willing to accept the risk should be allowed. Closing Everest would devastate Nepal's economy and Sherpa livelihoods, personal freedom. If people want to risk their lives, that's their choice. There's no consensus, and likely never will be. The most likely future is this: Everest will remain open, permits will increase, deaths will increase, and every few years, a disaster, a mass casualty event, a viral photo, a famous death will spark temporary outrage. The media will run stories. Governments will promise reforms. Companies will pledge better safety. And then the news cycle will move on and nothing will change because Everest is profitable, and profit matters more than safety, more than lives, more than dignity. So the trend will continue. Everest is getting deadlier every year, and it will keep getting deadlier until something catastrophic forces change, or until climate change destroys the mountain entirely, whichever comes first. And climbers will keep coming, keep paying, keep dying, because the summit calls, and for some people, that call is louder than the screams of the dying. Mount Everest doesn't care how many people die on its slopes. It's a mountain, ice, rock, wind, indifferent, eternal. It existed long before humans started climbing it, and it will exist long after we stop. But we're not mountains, we're human, and we should care. Since 1953, over 300 people have died on Mount Everest. Most of their bodies remain on the mountain, frozen, preserved, permanent. In the 1950s through 1980s, deaths were tragic but rare. Elite mountaineers pushing boundaries, accepting risk, dying nobly. But in the 2020s, deaths are preventable, predictable, avoidable. People are dying waiting in traffic jams, running out of oxygen because too many climbers created delays, collapsing from exhaustion because they lacked the experience to attempt Everest in the first place. These aren't heroic deaths, they're business casualties. After every deadly season, the climbing industry issues statements. Safety is our top priority. We're implementing new protocols. This tragedy will make us stronger, and then nothing changes. Permits increase, deaths increase, and the cycle continues. Climbers bear responsibility too, because no one forces them to attempt Everest. They choose it, they pay for it, they accept the risk. But many climbers are sold a lie. Everest is achievable for anyone with determination. This isn't true. Determination doesn't protect you from cerebral edema, doesn't make you immune to frostbite, doesn't guarantee you'll make good decisions while hypoxic. Everest requires experience, skill, judgment, and luck. And if you lack any of those, you'll probably die. The uncomfortable question is this: is climbing Everest worth dying for? For some, yes. They believe achieving a dream, standing on top of the world, is worth any risk. And if they die pursuing it, they die fulfilled. For others, no. They believe no mountain is worth your life. That survival is always more important than achievement. That coming home to your family matters more than summit photos. There's no right answer, just personal values and consequences. But the dead don't suffer. The living do. The families, the children, the spouses, they're the ones who carry the weight. Beck Weathers, wife, Peach, said this: "When Beck came home without hands, without a face, I had to decide, can I love this broken man? And I did. But it was hard, so hard." Yasuko Namba's family mourned her death in 1996, but they also mourned that she died alone, that her body was left on the mountain, that they never got to bury her. The families of the 16 Sherpas who died in 2014 received $15,000 in compensation, barely enough to survive 1 year. These are the real costs of Everest, not just the deaths, but the grief, the trauma, the families destroyed. Everest will keep killing people in increasing numbers until one of three things happens. Option 1. Climate change destroys the mountain, glaciers melt, routes become impassable. Option 2. A mass casualty event, 30+ deaths in one season, forces governments to close Everest temporarily. Option 3. Society decides summiting Everest isn't worth the human cost and demand drops. None of these seem likely in the near future, so the deaths will continue. Everest is getting deadlier every year, not because the mountain is harder, but because we've made it deadlier. Through overcrowding, climate change, commercialization, greed. We can stop this. Cap permits. Enforce experience requirements. Pay Sherpas fairly. Prioritize safety over profit. But we won't, because change is expensive and Everest is profitable, and profit always wins. So the mountain will keep taking every year, every season, every summit attempt that goes wrong, and we'll keep watching, sharing photos of the dead, expressing outrage, and then moving on until the next disaster, the next viral image, the next 17 deaths. Because the mountain doesn't care, but we should. And the fact that we don't, that we prioritize adventure tourism and bucket lists and Instagram photos over human lives, says everything about who we are. And maybe we deserve what Everest gives us. Not glory, but death. One climber at a time, until there's no one left willing to pay for it.